Elaine's calling us from Texas. Elaine, welcome to the program.
Hi, Dr. Cloud. Thank you so much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
So I have, of course, every caller is interesting and very unique, but
that includes you. That includes you, right?
So I appreciate that. So I am just a super quick background about me. I am married twice. My former husband was and still is abusive in his ways. We have children together, and so we have to communicate anyway. So
how old
there's
are
that.
The kids?
They're 14 and 15, and 2 boys.
All right.
And
and then after you were, when did the divorce occur, and when did you get remarried?
Yeah, so the divorce happened in 2000. So we were separated in 2013 due to a trauma event where I actually blacked out. So there was head trauma. I threw my head against the wall until I blacked out.
He did?
And
he did?
My ex-husband, yes. And so
terrible.
And that wasn't the first time there was physical, severe trauma in terms of physical abuse. I had to jump out of a window. I've been strangled. I've been choked. You name it. So there's been that. So of course there's lots of that trauma history. So that was back in 2013. We were separated.
And so you divorced him obviously at that time, right?
Yes.
Was he charged?
And then I've been married.
Was he charged?
So that's what's really interesting is he was. And by the time that we actually got a court date, I was actually in the police academy to become a police officer.
Talk about
talk
about a growth path, a learning path. You're going, not only am I not going to put up with this anymore in my life, I'm going to go protect other women from having to put up with this. So wow, that's cool.
Pretty much.
So then you met a new guy and you got married. How long after that?
Yeah, and so I met my current husband in early 2018. And we met at church, and this was a church group, if you will. I don't know if you're familiar with divorce care and single and parenting and those kinds of programs. And this was the single and parenting program that we met. And and it was a wonderful friendship that had blossomed from that. And then we started dating, and then we were like, that happened very quickly. So we were married by the time we started dating.
How quickly did you know him into marriage?
So we met early in 2018, about springtime, maybe March, April-ish, and then we were married in October.
Oh, that's quick.
That is quick, yeah.
Excuse me.
And we are a blended family, and so he has actually 2 children from 2 former marriages, one who is now 25 and one who is 14. So his 25-year-old is a son and his 14-year-old is a daughter. I have, of course, my 2 children, my 2 sons from my former marriage.
All right, so I'm worried about time a little bit here. What's the question?
Yeah. So the question is, how do I address my past trauma so that it is not as so it's not as volatile and triggerable? So what I have noticed, and I have to kind of preface that a little bit with the fact that my current husband has cyclical outbursts every 6 to 8 weeks or so. And they can be literally about nothing. I mean, this last time that he had an outburst, he called me a selfish, bad word, 4-letter word, for giving away a piece of a plant that was on our property, just a little piece, just to share with someone I knew. And so I was told that I was, and it was, that's the one thing that I liked and blah, 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 and all of these things. Well, I believe that he actually may be on the spectrum, where there is just a neurological processing difference and that causes him not to process certain things the same way. I've
When you
noticed
say,
very
hold
irrational
on,
thinking.
hold on a second. So everything is great, everything's normal, and then once every 6 weeks he has this, something triggers, and he has an angry outburst.
Absolutely, yes.
So every
It comes out of nowhere,
literally, I'm asking. Hold on a second. I'm asking a very specific question here, because there's a difference in somebody that is chronically kind of, blaming you and on your case and angry and bothered by stuff, and then all of a sudden it gets way worse than it always is. That's different than somebody that's really, really, everything's good, everything's normal, all of that, and then boom, you have these like incidents. So which one is it?
I want to say it's really out of the blue. It
Okay.
really is.
Well, that's certainly better. Okay, so something goes off in him and he has an angry outburst, and then obviously that's going to trigger you because you've had domestic violence, you've had abuse, and so yeah, I would say that would have to hit some buttons in you that hurt as well, right?
Absolutely. And
Okay,
obviously I've
so what
come
is,
a very long way.
obviously, I mean, if you got through police training, there's a lot of screening and a lot of stuff, and you've completed a very rigorous path. So what is the question? I'm sorry, we're close on
So
time
then
here. What is the question?
absolutely. My question is how, I've obviously identified some of these patterns as I've observed them over now, to almost however long that we've been together. And how do I love him well in setting boundaries that protect my safety, my emotional safety,
Sure.
and also set very firm boundaries on what is and is not appropriate for him to say and do during these outbursts.
Okay, so question, how much of an ally is he in this problem? In other words, does he say, gosh, I had these outbursts, I'm sorry, I don't want to do that, I know it triggers you, I'm sorry for you. So are we on the same team here?
And that's what's a little bit difficult, is because he actually tends to minimize them. And so that's where
Okay.
I'm wondering if I'm trauma bonded in some way.
Well, I don't know what terms to use, but I like it that you said what you see is when you try to talk to him that he tends to minimize it. Okay, because that's actually a process that's probably going on inside of himself as well. He's minimizing it. I don't really have a problem. It's not that bad. It's only every 6 weeks and all of that. And then he's feeding that to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's why I asked earlier about the pattern kind of in between. Now, in answer to your question, and unfortunately we're close on time here, but I'm gonna give you some 3 or 4 big things to think about. The first question I asked you was, how much of an ally do you have? Because their question was, how do you have good boundaries around what triggers you and what hurts for you and all of that, right? And, making it safe. Well, it's very different to set up boundaries when you have somebody cooperating with you to do that than if you're having to do it on your own. So what I would want you to first of all do is sit down and say, look, see if you can hear this. The outbursts that you're saying that you experience is not a big deal. Well, they are a big deal for me. So it may be that you feel, Joey, that it's not a big deal for you. What I want you to hear, and I need you to hear, and I will actually say that you have to hear, is that they are a big deal for me. And I can't negate and I don't want you to negate that they're a big deal for me. So I want us to think together about a plan. So you are as concerned about that they're as big deal for me as you are that they're not as big a deal for you. See, that's what's got to
Yeah.
happen. And then there's a couple of ways that you can show that to me. One is you can start to listen and hear like the things that kind of like, feel that way. And you can hear how it affects me when it happens. A, B, this is really bad for me. And so I want us to go together to maybe a trauma informed therapist who maybe can help you understand what this does to me and give us some tools to do that. And three, Joey, this doesn't come out of nowhere. Something's triggering you inside, whether it's neurological or psychological. But but this is eating away at you. It's sitting there and it's just waiting. So let's go get some help together. See, that's what an ally would be. And then you could have practical steps like if you'll learn to see the precursors maybe, and then you tell, look, call your therapist. I'm going to get in another room. I don't want to, there's tactical things that you can do to protect yourself. But I would want you to enlist him as an ally. Now, if he didn't want to do that, then that's where you enlist him as okay, we're on different pages here, and we need to talk to somebody to get us on the same page. So and then
that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, well then that's what I would do, and I'd go to a trauma informed therapist, because if people are, there's two extremes in the world of everything in life. There's extremes, but there are counselors that don't understand the neurological, psychological, relational, emotional, spiritual aspects of trauma. And there are some that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That kind of, you know what I mean? Like everything is trauma and traumatic. And so I would want you to find somebody with good marriage counseling skills. It's a good marriage counselor. And as part of their understanding that they've had training. I mean, I just, I signed up for, and I didn't just start this yesterday, but this, well, actually it was last week because I was sick this week. I was so excited because I just signed up for 2 or 3 new kind of trauma informed, research, continuing ed stuff. And that's not even what I do full time, but I want you talking to somebody that when you ask them the question, have you dealt with couples? And have you dealt with couples and been trained to deal with couples that have trauma as part of what they're overcoming? So all that to say this, all of that is in service of protecting you, but try to get them as an ally first. And then if that doesn't happen, then the next step is to try to, get somebody to understand and get him over the hump and get him to have his work. But thirdly, ultimately, you are going to have to figure out with somebody, how can I make sure that I'm protected and have the boundaries that I need to have? And that can come from very significant things to, if this happens again, then I won't even be talking to you at that moment. I'll leave and go spend the night at Susie's or something. So you need some things like that.
And I suppose that's kind of where we're at right now is, I've pretty much given him that ultimatum, if you will, is, if you're going to start calling me names and destroy the relationship.
Why don't we, let's not call it an ultimatum. Let's just call it a if then.
Right.
It's an if then.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And so at what point?
At what point what?
At what point do I have to say he is totally unwilling and essentially abandoning the marriage?
Well, right now, what you've described is y'all are still talking and he's in the conversation. What he's abandoning is just the dynamic. He's not coming clean about the dynamic, right? That's a long way from that he's abandoning the marriage. What I've recommended is that you take some steps to try to get the alliance going within the marriage, and he's involved in the process. And generally, to answer your question, when you realize that somebody has totally abandoned the marriage, it's when they won't even participate in a process of acknowledging that there's a problem and dealing with it, and they just go their own way. So that will show itself. But the only way to show
Got
that
it.
or anything else is to do the things you need to do, or that
Got
he
it.
needs to do.
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. I got to
Okay.
run. Um, you've had a lot to deal with, and God bless you for holding these kids up high and working on all that. And let's have hope that he can hear this. And at the same time, don't blame yourself for this. Don't minimize it.
That is definitely hard to do.
That's why.
Definitely hard
That's
to
why I
do,
said it.
thinking that my picker is broken.
Well, not only that, but in the dynamics of what happens a lot of times, a lot of times in a lot of scenarios, victims end up kind of blaming themselves. Well, oh, I shouldn't have done this, or I provoked it, or and that's false. It's an internalization of somebody else's badness. So don't minimize it. Don't explain it away. You have to have a firm thing and say, look, this is not acceptable. I'm not gonna be screamed at and have these outbursts.